65 years have passed since the beginning of the Red Years. That terrible era of Auckton's history culminated in the expulsion of Crown forces from Auckton Island, and led to the eventual proclamation of the Free State of Auckton. In the years since, Auckton was largely alone. Cut off from the world, Auckton had to rely only on itself. Growing their own food, forging their own weapons, building their own ships, Auckton managed to repulse every attack the Crown threw at it, maintaining their independence. The bravery and courage of the Free State inspired other movements across the continent. The Tarath Spring began slowly at first. The spark was lit, but it had yet to catch. Once it did, however, a blazing inferno was ignited. The unified provinces of Andlia and the unified provinces of Odresh both declared independence, taking every piece of Frostock territory on mainland Tarath. For the first time, Auckton found friends in its neighbors, increasingly with Odresh, who was a fellow maritime trading nation. The brotherly love between Odresh, Auckton, and Andlia quickly faded, however, as Auckton grew closer and closer to Odresh. The referendum to join Odresh was the last straw to Andlia, not wanting their major ports in the Saffier Sea to be controlled by another power. Andlia moved swiftly, occupying the whole of Auckton. As Andlia attempted to integrate Auckton into Andlia and strip away the last vestiges of autonomy that it had, however, Auckton could no longer stand it. Once again, the shackles of occupation were quickly tossed off, and another referendum was held. This time, however, Odresh would not back down. Auckton was a jewel for either of the two Frostock brothers to possess, and neither Andlia nor Odresh would allow Auckton to fall into the other's hands once again. Thus, we arrive now in the year 107 post-Draconis, the start of the Brothers' War. As a family feud devolves into violence, welcome, as always, to Auckton. Heyo, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Auckton. It has been a little while. Life has been busy, to say the least. Um, Finished up with finals for the school year, and now I am working a lot to pay the bills. All that good stuff. Last week I did the volume one recap for Auckton, a video which I'm pretty damn proud of and seems to have done pretty well. Usually I've noticed my lore videos don't tend to do very well. I mean, primarily the ones that start out with some sort of cinematic, like still pictures and stuff like that, but I'm still learning how to do this whole YouTube thing. I'm still very new, very small channel, even though we just passed 250 subscribers, which I'm super proud of. I can't thank y'all enough for all the support, all the views, and I can't wait to see where this channel goes. So, we start this episode of Auckton almost 70 or so years after the last episode. We are in 107 post-Draconis at the time of this building. And a lot has changed in Auckton. Auckton declared itself an independent city-state at the end of the last proper episode, but uh, Frostock, still trying to maintain a stranglehold on its colonies, did everything in its power to keep Auckton from expanding and becoming a more powerful, prosperous nation. In the intervening time, the bravery of the people of Auckton inspired other Frostock colonies to rebel, along with colonies from dozens of other nations, leading to the Tarath Spring and the formation of the Frostocki speaking nations of Odresh and Andlia, much akin to our world's Canada and America, though they are very different in a bunch of different ways I'm sure I'll discuss in later episodes. Um, as Frostock sits at the mouth of the Cardiffil Straits, leading from the Sapphire Sea to the Saris Ocean, um, Auckton is incredibly strategically important for trade. And as a result, after independence, Andlia was very keen to get Auckton in its sphere. And when Auckton voted to join Odresh, that was too much for Andlia, so they invaded and occupied it. And after breaking away from Andlia in a second smaller revolution, they once again are trying to join Odresh, much to the dismay of Andlia. And that's where we are now, at the start of the Brothers' War between Odresh and Andlia. Excuse my voice and my sniffles. I am dealing with a sinus infection and a cold, so I apologize for that. So I've been yapping on for long enough. What am I working on now? Auckton was able to seize a few of the Frostock naval vessels during its revolution earlier on, and was able to reverse engineer how to build these sorts of ships of the line. And as a result, we see now the start of the Auckton shipyards. Auckton, as a trading city, is it's very necessary for Auckton to have this sort of industry in order to protect its trade and its maritime borders. So that's what I'm working on now. We see a ship that is in progress, one that is currently being launched, and a couple that are being loaded up with gear and equipment to set sail for the first time. Because of the terrain here, I'm having to do this in kind of two tiers. The lower tier being the dry docks themselves and some docks to load cargo and whatnot into the new ships. And an upper tier where I imagine these are the offices, the manufactories, and whatnot necessary to build all of the things required for a ship of the line to operate. Um, yeah, I'm pretty proud of how this is coming out. There's more I'd probably like to add to this in the future, especially like cranes and all that good stuff, but I couldn't really find a good asset for the smaller sort of like pulley operated cranes that probably would have been used around this time. But yeah, I'm definitely trying to go for a very different style than the older docks around Auckton look like, if that makes sense. Um, we are officially, I would say, in the equivalent of the early 1800s. And when I say early 1800s, I mean like very early 1800s. 107 PD, I've said this before, but it doesn't have like a direct analog. Like it, 107 PD doesn't exactly equal, 1801, but it more references a sort of time period, if that makes sense. So I would say that this era of Auckton is roughly equivalent to around the 1780s to the 1810s. So yeah, that's where Auckton is today. We are transitioning into a very different time period than when we saw Auckton last time, and we'll see the effects of that later on. So, back to the game. I placed down all of these crates, cargo. I imagine these are building materials. These are armaments, different things that the ship needs before it sets sail. And yeah, that's more or less the shipyard done. So, as I mentioned before, this is roughly 80 or so years after the last episode. So, a lot will have changed in Auckton over that time period. As a result, I'm getting rid of a lot of these old farms, trying to make sure I'm not accidentally taking out roads, or at least that many roads, because the survey grid is a pretty big part of Auckton's city planning. Now I'm just running some roads in here. I decided to keep using this kind of like smaller grid style that I developed in New Yorkford and Georgetown. So, yeah, Auckton is expanding rapidly, especially with the lifting of the embargo by Frostock and closer trade relations with Odresh and Andlia before, the occupation. I imagine a lot of immigrants would be coming into Auckton. I really like these. They're called Victorian houses, but I've said this in a previous episode. I think that they're generic enough where they fit in really anywhere. Uh, I think they fit in this time period, at least. They don't really have many props to designate them as like a modern or Victorian design. I imagine the thing that kind of sets it as a Victorian design is those sort of bay windows. But we can just say, Auckton in this universe has a different kind of architectural style than our world. I'm not an expert in like architectural history. More, I'm just running off of vibes. I'll be honest, but I think it fits the vibe. It passes the vibe check for Auckton. But yeah, I'm wanting to kind of hybridize these more standard, Trinity houses and the what are they called? The Georgian row houses made by Do Not Eat, and kind of hybridize them with these Victorians. So I'm copying over you can see in those like blocks. Some of them are half Victorian, half Georgian. Others are entirely Victorian. Others are entirely Georgian. And with the big jump in time, I figured it was about time that Auckton got a few more paved roads. Um, a long, long time ago, in terms of these episodes, New Lockport, South Vale, and New Wolverhampton all got a few cobblestone roads around the place, but I waved that off as they got that because the settlements have been here for about 500 years now, and I figured that over time there would be the incentive to kind of improve the road networks in those settlements. So yeah, just dragging out more and more of those houses, trying to connect the settlements of Auckton, the city of Auckton, and Georgetown. Currently, they are legally distinct settlements, but I'm sure over time, Auckton might annex Georgetown. The city must expand after all. But yeah. So I'm coming into the houses and demolishing a few of them. I got my kind of template for filler buildings there on the right, and I'm wanting to replace out some of these Victorian and Georgian houses with different designs just to break up the monotony of the blocks. It's not very fun to look at unless it has a little bit of something to catch your eye, to make it stand apart, I suppose. But yeah, just doing that for a little bit, and wow, I left in more of this than I thought. um, Apologies to anybody who gets motion sickness. It appears we're zooming in and out a lot here. And yeah, I'm coming through with these Georgians. I decided to grab this little house because it kind of looks a little similar. These are actually the same houses that I used in the various forts as barracks. So take that as you will. If they're good enough for soldiers, perhaps they're good enough for the common people. But yeah, just replacing a few of them around the place, just like I did with the Victorians, and I believe that's it for this section, at least. I lied. uh, the funny thing about editing this is I actually don't remember everything that I do. Um, so a lot of the time when I'm watching this and doing my voiceover, I'm experiencing the video for the first time just as y'all are, which on one hand is great because I can just kind of ramble on in certain portions when things drag on, but in other times I completely lose track of what I'm doing and what time I do things. I do know what I'm doing now, though, and hopefully this won't be a long section. Basically, I'm going through here with Move It and selecting a bunch of these little houses and deleting them just to kind of taper off the density. It doesn't make sense in my mind for these blocks to be entirely filled in and then transition immediately into forest. So I'm just coming through and tapering them off a little bit. I'm deleting more buildings the closer we get to the edge of town and trying to keep that core around the main street connecting the city of Auckton to Georgetown more dense. But yeah, you will also notice I got rid of the all of the refugee tents around the place, um, and that is intentional. You can see below at the bottom of the screen now. That's where the refugee camp used to be, and now it is filled in with proper development. Granted, low detailed development, but development nonetheless. So I have decided that Auckton was an independent nation for roughly 30 years. Um, and as such, it deserves a legislature, especially now that it's a province of Odresh as well. It needs some sort of big legislative building. And as Auckton is a rather prosperous trade city, I figured it made sense for it to have one of these more opulent buildings. But yeah, using procedural objects to. I placed down the main building there in the center. I decide this is the one that I want to use. It is, I believe, the land tag of Alsace-Lothringen. I do not speak German, I apologize, but it is the parliament of some German state. Presumably Alsace-Lothringen. But yeah, so I'm coming in here with procedural objects. The textures look weird when you look at them too closely, but essentially I cut this wing off from the rest of the building and move the windows and whatnot around to sort of make sense. And then I bring it over here to attach it to the rest of the building, and then lower it slightly. That way it looks distinct. Lining it up there, and ta-da! Uh, that way I can kind of expand out this building and make it look a little bit more like a property capital building. I was trying to figure out how to invert the the procedural object in order to put it on the other side, and I wound up doing this and giving up and just doing the whole process that I did for the left wing over on the right side. Mostly the main building completed. So, once I, you know, get my stuff together, I select everything and move it into a position where I think it is a bit more appropriate. This very large legislative building, just like with the old Congressional Hall, that needs a name, by the way. The old, you know, Parliament Hall. If you have a name for it, let me know, because I feel like Independence Hall or something like that is too on the nose. So it needs some sort of in-universe name that I would appreciate. So yeah, like with the old Parliamentary Hall, I wanted to do some sort of like loop road to give it that sort of sense of importance that a building like this probably deserves. So I drag out a one-way cobblestone road and make this sort of a driveway, which I'm actually quite proud of. I think it came out very nicely. And with this big ol' piece of land back here, I decided I wanted to make a garden for the building. Similar to how the old hall had a, for the time, well landscaped front yard. I wanted this to actually go like all out. This is a matured society, and as such, I wanted to represent that by doing doing it justice, I wanted this to be the first properly grand and opulent building in the city. We've had, large plantation estates. The old parliamentary hall, I feel, looks very nice, sure. But this is on a different scale. This is a historic building that probably would be used up to the modern day. It is Auckton's equivalent to the United States Capitol building. It is Auckton's equivalent to Buckingham Palace. It is an expression of wealth and power and prosperity. So I wanted it to really represent that as best as I could. So I not only used, the big detailed pretty building, but I also wanted to landscape this to an extent that I've never landscaped a building before in City Skylines. I mentioned this before, but I'm not really a detailer. Uh, Most of the time in City Skylines, I just like building big cities. I like seeing the population line go up. So Auckton is a step in a different direction for me. Uh, and I'm really enjoying that change so far. I imagine as we get, closer to the modern day and things get more and more detailed, as the workshop actually has assets appropriate for the time period, and I'm not having to kind of retrofit things to fit into the time period. For example, we still have long ships because there's no like colonial era fishing boats, but we make do. But yeah, so what I'm doing now is I made those pathways to wrap around the building, and I wanted to cover them with cobblestone because concrete, I feel, is not very fitting to Auckton yet, at least. I mean, it's based on, in a post-English city, so I mean, asphalt most certainly will be coming. So I found these really nice decals, these like manicured lawns. And perhaps this is anachronistic, but I think they're very pretty, and I think they work very well for Auckton. So I decided, and this one section in particular, to use these decals to make a very well manicured lawn. Uh, I've watched a couple of documentaries on this subject actually. So the concept of the modern lawn essentially originated from rich people trying to replicate a well, like, how do I word this? They wanted to make it look like livestock went through the fields without actually having to deal with the bad parts of having a livestock, namely, manure and having actual animals on your front yard. So, yeah, they would aristocratic elite would hire people to trim the grass to make it look like an animal had eaten the grass. And because of its connotations, with its associations with the elite doing it, eventually the common public wanted to have a taste of this sort of style. And that's how we get your well manicured mowed lawns. Originally, estates would quite literally be built on a hill in order to separate the actual pasture from where the people lived without having to build a fence. And then they would get servants or slaves or whatever workforce they used to, yeah, manicure the lawn. Yeah, I believe, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but Thomas Jefferson's Monticello was built in this style. He built his mansion up on a hill with retaining walls to prevent any livestock from getting in, and would use his slaves to sort of make this sort of well manicured yard. So I do believe that this actually is period appropriate, but having it be contained in this little area is more realistic as having a massive area being this manicured and nice would require a massive amount of labor and manpower that I don't think the government of Auckton could really afford. But yeah, coming in here just to I wanted to show how important this is. So similar with the university, I'm deciding to fence it in with these very nice fences. I really wish these were networks, but they're not. So I'm making do and placing these by hand. It's actually fairly difficult to place props in a straight line without prop line tool. I've been meaning to get it, but I've just not gotten around to it. I'll be honest. That's my fault, my own laziness. But I'm very happy with how this is coming out. I'm using PO more and more to do detail work like this. I'm getting more used to it. I'm nowhere near. This is the first ever this is the first. Auckton is the first project I've ever used procedural objects on. I've never messed with it before. So every time I use it in Auckton, it is a learning experience. And it's quirky, that's for sure. I mean, you saw me fail to use the project tool. I have no idea what that thing is used for. My best guess is just to shorten buildings, but I can just use that with the distort tool. Or I can shorten buildings with the distort tool, so I don't see what the project tool is for. But uh yeah, procedural objects is certainly a very, very powerful tool, and I look forward to using it more and more as I get more familiar with it. I'm definitely proud of how I managed to get the Capitol building to look. That's for sure. But yeah. So let's go back to lore, if you will humor me for a little bit. Uh, Basically, Auckton as a free city was or is rather a republic essentially. They are a democracy, just like America was, or America is rather. Um, Unlike America, they would probably have something a bit closer to what we would identify as a parliament, as they are much more egalitarian in their, I suppose, original setup. Granted, just like in our world, the elite of Auckton had most of the control. Let's not forget that Auckton is still a slaveholding city, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, so while the landowning elite certainly have most of the political power in Auckton, uh, the Parliament of Auckton, which is also called the Volksflet, the in universe it is called the Volksflet. The first time I'm actually doing any sort of like conlang thingy. It's from the Old English words for people and also Senate Hall. Uh, don't correct me on that. I I spent like 20 minutes researching how to smush those words together. But yeah, so in this early republic, the landing owning elite would have the vast majority of political power. But the common people would also be able to vote, so long as you were a landed male. Um, so yeah, definitely not a pluralist society yet. But with Auckton's focus on freedom and egalitarianism after the oppression of the Red Years, and before that, excuse me, because of the oppression of the ash taxes resulting in the Red Years, they wanted to make something that was a little more egalitarian than the early American Republic. The early American Republic was definitely a bourgeoisie republic. Uh, in order to not only did you have to be a landowning male in the early republic, you had to be a wealthy landowning male, which meant that the actual voting pool for the early republic was very small, and was of course expanded later. But Auckton has the privilege of actually allowing anybody to vote, or any male to vote, as long as they hold uh, property, which is better than what America had at the time. So yeah, with Auckton being a little more pluralist, I imagine legislature would look a good bit different than how it did in our world. Uh, Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm boring you with all with the politics, and y'all don't really care about how the government structure of Auckton works. But it is something that interests me, and I hope to kind of convey that and make y'all think about like how would this world work? How would the different circumstances that brought Auckton into being uh, lead to different developments? That's really the purpose of this experiment. Auckton is both a parallel to our world, but also a unique world. It is a reflection of ours while still being its own thing. But yeah, enough rambling. I'm coming back here to the rear gardens to place down these hedges. I wanted these nice dirt paths from the Park Life DLC to, yeah, Auckton has a habit of catching fire. I noticed while I was placing down the hedges that like the population was like plummeting. So yeah. But anyway, yeah, I wanted what was I saying? Oh yeah, Park Life DLC, nice paths, but I didn't want people to just waltz into where you know the grass is nice and well kept and there's flower beds and stuff like that. I did want, however, a nice fountain to be the centerpiece of this the largest tract of land in the gardens. But yeah, I'm more or less finishing up the final bits of detailing around the Volksflat, and moving on to our next piece. These are a couple of buildings that I thought might work as some sort of other government buildings, like a court, presidential office, all of that good stuff. But the one that I deleted earlier, I just felt didn't fit the vibe, and this one I couldn't really make into a nice design especially compared to the larger Volksflut. It didn't fit in. So I deleted that and placed down the first bank of the United States. That's right, we're in America all along, baby. No. This was made by Do Not Eat of the Franklin series. I cannot sing his praises enough. And I figured it fits, it does pass the vibe check. I'm trying to find other buildings in here that could work as government buildings, but unfortunately I fall short. So instead I decided, this is a big, prominent building. Um, both the whatever this is in lore. Maybe it's the court, maybe it is just the first bank of Auckton. But I figured that it deserved to be in a very nice area. Uh, I imagine loads of money would have been poured into the development of this district. So for the first time, we're seeing much more modern, I suppose, looking architecture. I say that as I place down an old pub that I've been using prevalently across the whole of Ogden, across all time periods. But anyway, um, yeah, just coming through here and sort of remember how I said I wanted to taper off the neighborhoods? Well, I still do, except I got a little carried away, and pretty much this entire district needs to be filled in again after I deleted all of that. But yeah, so just coming in here, trying to find some nice buildings that kind of fit the district. As a government district, I want this to be a lot more fancy. I was saying earlier, I think a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort would have been put into making this district stand out. Really, really work as the center of power of the fledgling Free State, and now the province of Auckton. But yeah, just doing a couple more final details, and we are coming up on the end, folks. My name is Takumu Courtwade. I thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you enjoyed the video, please do like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. We're growing pretty fast, a lot faster than I thought we would, and we could not have done it without y'all's help. And I'm genuinely very, very thankful for the support. I have a Discord. Please do join that if you want to get involved in crafting the lore of Auckton. I really take the suggestions made there to heart. Uh, I would love your feedback down there in the comments as well. Uh, And yeah, let me know what you think of the episode, what you think of Auckton so far, and what you want to see as we come into this brilliant new era of Auckton. I have a Patreon as well. I will be putting the save game from the end of Volume 1 on there. There's also a raw footage archive, and yeah. I wanted to also give a shout out to some of my inspirations. Go watch Franklin, I've said that before, but also go watch, I believe his name is Acruas of the Altengrad series. That's another big inspiration, especially for my other series of Saffier. Yeah, that is it, folks. Sorry for the long ad read. Enjoy the cinematics and have a good one.